This is the story of Nitiffa Wade, a 40-year-old mother whose life was brutally taken in front of her son inside a Philadelphia barbershop, and Armand Hilton, the man who once promised to love her, but instead made a different promise, one that he would tragically keep. This story isn't just about murder, it's about trust, betrayal, and the dangerous intersection of love and property. How much would you trust your partner with your possessions? It's a question many of us face in relationships, whether to combine bank accounts, whose name goes on the house deed, or how to split assets. For some, it's a simple matter of practicality. For others, it's the ultimate test of trust. But what happens when that trust becomes a weapon? This incident happened in the bustling city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, a city known for its rich history, iconic landmarks, and nickname, the City of Brotherly Love. But on October 7, 2023, love was nowhere to be found in a quiet North Philly neighborhood. Instead, a local barbershop, typically a safe haven of community and camaraderie, became the backdrop for an act of shocking violence that left a family shattered and a city searching for answers. On October 7, 2023, the day began like any other autumn Saturday. The streets were alive with the usual weekend energy, people running errands, children playing, and barbershops buzzing with the weekly ritual of haircuts and community gossip. The 2,500 block of Lehigh Avenue was no different. Its barbershop was a cornerstone of neighborhood life where stories were shared between the rhythmic hum of clippers and casual laughter. Inside that barbershop, the familiar scene played out. Barbers focused on their craft, customers waiting their turn, phones scrolling through social media, and the ever-present TV adding its own soundtrack to the atmosphere. It was the kind of place where everyone felt like family, where children grew up getting their haircuts, and where the community's pulse could be felt in every conversation. At 1:45 p.m., Nitiffa Wade walked in with her son. She was stunning as always, dressed impeccably, a testament to the success she'd built as a business owner and socialite. Those who knew her would later say she had a glow about her that day, perhaps from the life she'd rebuilt, the new love she'd found, or simply the joy of spending time with her child. The barbers greeted her warmly. She was well known here, respected not just for her beauty but for her entrepreneurial spirit and generosity. But what no one in that barbershop knew was that a man had been watching this woman and her son as they made their move into the barbershop. This man was someone who had once shared Nitiffa's dreams, someone who had entrusted her with everything he owned, someone who had made a threatening promise in a recorded message. "I'm never going to touch you again. I'm never physically going to hurt you. You marry this man, and I'm blowing his head off on everything I love. I'm going back to prison. I don't give a care about that."
And you've been bringing it up, bringing it up, bringing it up. So now I'm gonna give you what you want. I'm never gonna touch you again. I'm never physically gonna hurt you. You marry this nigga, I'm gonna get off on everything I love. I'm going back to prison on everything.
I know the significance of these words may not be clear to you right now, but trust me, it will become clearer very soon. So, stay with me as we uncover this heartbreaking story together. These same words, captured in Nitiffa's phone as evidence of the brewing storm, would eventually prove prophetic in the most tragic way. Because at that moment, as Nitiffa sat in that barbershop, this man was about to turn this sanctuary of the community into a crime scene. As the door of the barbershop swung open, time seemed to slow down as heads turned toward the sound. This man walked in, Armand Hilton, a 44-year-old man, his face hard with determination, his eyes focused only on Nitiffa. The usual barbershop chatter died instantly as tension filled the air. Those who sensed the danger froze, unsure whether to run or hide. As this man faced Nitiffa, her maternal instincts kicking in, she moved to shield her son. What happened next would be replayed countless times in witness statements, news reports, and the nightmares of those present. 2 shots rang out in quick succession, one to the torso, one to the head of Nitiffa. The sounds echoed off the walls, cutting through the music and television noise, replacing them with screams and chaos. By 2 p.m., medical responders would pronounce Nitiffa Wade dead at the scene of the barbershop. This story isn't just about how Nitiffa Wade died. It's a story about how this woman lived, the empire she built, and the terrible decisions she made that some would call clever and others would call betrayal. Nitiffa Wade was a successful businesswoman. a woman known for her vibrant personality and unyielding drive. But who was she beyond the headlines? And how did her life come to such a tragic and violent end? And most importantly, what was her connection to this man who shot her? This is a story of broken trust between a woman and a man who trusted a lover with his wealth and got betrayed. However, the question isn't just whether you would trust your partner with your possessions. It's whether you can truly know what someone is capable of when that trust is broken. As we go deeper into this story, you'll realize that sometimes the most dangerous promises are the ones made by those who once promised to love us. You're watching True Crime Stories 24/7. Thanks for joining. Please do well to subscribe and like this video to support us. To truly grasp the weight of what happened that October day, you need to know about the empire this woman had built, the lives she touched, and the legacy that was cut short. At just 20 years old, Nitiffa Wade was already breaking records. As the youngest graduate from Methodist Hospital's nursing school, she would often joke with her classmates about the irony of her situation. In the state of Pennsylvania, I'm old enough to give a narcotic, but not old enough to have a drink. That early achievement was just the first glimpse of a woman who would consistently defy expectations and push boundaries. But Nitiffa wasn't content with just one path to success. While many would have been satisfied with a stable nursing career, she saw bigger possibilities. She looked at Philadelphia's business landscape and, instead of seeing limitations, she saw opportunities. One by one, she began building her enterprises, each one filling a specific need in her community. Her first venture was a home healthcare service, a natural extension of her nursing background. But what set her apart wasn't just her medical knowledge, it was her approach to care. Those who worked with her spoke of her insistence on treating patients like family, of her late-night visits to ensure quality care, and of her willingness to step in herself when needed. This wasn't just a business for her. It was a mission. Then came the cleaning service, born from her recognition that many working families struggled to maintain their homes while juggling careers. She didn't just want to clean houses. She wanted to give people back their time and their peace of mind. Her employees would later share stories of how she would personally train them, teaching them not just about cleaning techniques, but about treating each home with respect. Her entrepreneurial spirit didn't stop there. Recognizing the growing interest in natural products, she launched her herbs and spices seasoning shop. This wasn't just another business venture. It was a reflection of her commitment to her Islamic faith and healthy living. She sourced her products carefully, often traveling to meet suppliers personally, ensuring everything met her exacting standards. The hair extension business followed, another testament to her ability to spot market opportunities. But more than that, it was about helping women feel confident, feel beautiful. She would often say that when you changed someone's hair, you changed how they saw themselves, and that transformation was worth more than any profit. But perhaps her most ambitious venture was in real estate. She began small, buying properties, renovating them, and creating homes where there had been neglect. Each property was a project she threw herself into, learning everything from zoning laws to construction basics. She was building more than a portfolio. She was rebuilding neighborhoods, creating opportunities for families to own homes, to build their own dreams. Her social media presence reflected this success, but not in the way many might assume. Yes, there were the designer clothes, the luxury cars, the vacation photos. But there were also the behind-the-scenes moments, the late nights at her businesses, the community events she sponsored, the religious gatherings where she taught others about the Quran. She wasn't just showing her success, she was showing her work, her faith, her community involvement. To her 3 children, she was simply mom, the woman who, despite running multiple businesses, never missed a school event, who made sure homework was done before play, and who taught them about their faith and their responsibility to their community. She would often bring them to her businesses, teaching them the value of hard work, the importance of giving back, and the power of dreams backed by determination. This was Nitiffa Wade, nurse, entrepreneur, mother, mentor, and community leader. A woman who had built her success brick by brick, who had created opportunities not just for herself, but for others. A woman who, even as she achieved more and more success, remained grounded in her faith and her commitment to helping others. But success, as they say, can be a double-edged sword. The very empire she built would become entangled in a web of trust, betrayal, and ultimately, tragedy. The properties she acquired, the wealth she accumulated, these would become focal points in a story that would end in that barbershop on Lehigh Avenue. Her friends would later say that Nitiffa had a gift for seeing potential in properties, in businesses, in people. Perhaps that's what she saw in Armand Hilton when their paths first crossed. Perhaps that's why she agreed to have his properties put in her name while he served time. Or perhaps it was love, that most powerful of emotions that can cloud even the sharpest business mind. What we do know is that the same determination that built her empire would eventually lead her to make decisions that would change everything. Decisions about love, trust, and starting over. Because Nitiffa Wade wasn't just building businesses, she was building a life. A life that would be cut tragically short that Saturday afternoon in October. What began as a business arrangement would spiral into a deadly mix of love, trust, and betrayal. Armand Speedy Hilton wasn't just any man in Philadelphia. He had a reputation, a history, and most importantly, he had property. Lots of it. Properties scattered across Philadelphia and stretching all the way to Miami. But his past would always cast a shadow over his present. In March 2002, Armand made headlines, not for his real estate empire, but for a kidnapping that would reveal the darker side of his nature. Along with two accomplices, he orchestrated the kidnapping of a 17-year-old boy outside a store. Their target wasn't random. They knew the teen's family had recently received a $100,000 legal settlement. The plan was simple but brutal. Hold the boy for ransom, demand $50,000, and threaten to kill him if the family didn't comply. The kidnappers bound the teenager to a chair, his mouth gagged, his hands tied. But they hadn't counted on the family's quick thinking or the boy's determination. While the family contacted police and set up a sting operation with a decoy ransom drop, the teen managed to escape through a window, flagging down help. When one of the kidnappers went to collect the planted money, police moved in. But Armand? He showed his talent for evasion even then, a skill that would become relevant again years later. Fast forward to when he met Nitiffa Wade. By then, Armand had built his own empire in real estate, accumulating properties and wealth. But his past meant he needed someone he could trust, someone who could hold his assets while he dealt with his legal troubles. In Nitiffa, he saw not just a beautiful, successful woman, but someone who understood business, who knew how to manage properties, who could be trusted with everything he'd built. Their relationship deepened. Here was a woman who matched him in ambition, who could move in the same social circles, who could help legitimize his business interests. And Nitiffa? Perhaps she saw in Armand someone who matched her entrepreneurial spirit, who understood the hustle, who had built something from nothing, even if his methods weren't always legal. When Armand faced another prison sentence, the decision seemed logical. Put the properties in Nitiffa's name. She had the business acumen, the clean record, the reputation. It was meant to be temporary, just until he returned. But what happens when temporary becomes permanent? What happens when trust becomes an opportunity? Obviously, Nitiffa wasn't ready to let go of the properties. She wanted to make them hers. While Armand sat in his cell, Nitiffa was transforming their arrangement. One by one, the properties were transferred, and their ownership changed. But she didn't stop there. In what must have felt like the ultimate betrayal to Armand, she filed for divorce. And then, the final twist of the knife. She married another man. From behind prison walls, Armand could only watch as the empire he'd built slipped through his fingers. The woman he'd trusted with everything had rebuilt her life without him, using his own properties as the foundation. His recorded messages to her became increasingly threatening, his anger building with each unanswered demand for his property's return. "Stop throwing it in my face before I kill you," he warned in one recording. "I'm going back to prison. I don't give a care about that." These weren't empty threats. They were promises from a man who had already shown what he was capable of. But Nitiffa, perhaps emboldened by her success or trusting in her documentation of his threats, continued to live her life openly, flaunting her success on social media and building her new life with her new husband. The streets of Philadelphia whispered about the situation. Some said Nitiffa was clever, turning a temporary arrangement into permanent prosperity. Others warned that she was playing a dangerous game with a man known for violence. But Nitiffa kept building, succeeding, and kept posting about her luxurious lifestyle, even as Armand's threats grew darker, more specific. When Armand was released from prison, he found himself in a world where everything he'd built belonged to someone else. His properties, his plans, his future, all of it now in the hands of a woman who had moved on without him. For a man who had once orchestrated a kidnapping over $50,000, the loss of his entire real estate empire was more than an insult. It was a call to action. The stage was set for a confrontation that would end in that barbershop on Lehigh Avenue. But before the shots were fired, before the tragic end, there were warning signs, red flags that fluttered in the wind of social media posts and recorded threats, signals that something deadly was brewing in the streets of Philadelphia. That summer and fall of 2023, Nitiffa's social media took on a darker tone. Between posts showcasing her success, the luxury cars, designer clothes, vacation photos, there were cryptic messages. Warnings hidden in plain sight. She was documenting everything, creating a digital trail of evidence, as if she knew she needed to prove what was coming. The threats from Armand became more frequent and more intense. In recordings she carefully preserved, his voice dripped with a dangerous mix of possession and rage. "I really do want to touch you again," he said in one recording, his voice deceptively calm before shifting to fury. "I'm never physically going to hurt you. You marry this man. I'm blowing his head off on everything I love." But these weren't just words thrown in anger. They were calculated promises from a man who had nothing left to lose. "I'm going back to prison," he declared. "I don't give a care about that." For Armand, prison wasn't a deterrent. It was a price he was willing to pay. A shocking declaration that would prove prophetic. Friends and followers noticed the shift in Nitiffa's posts. The woman who once shared business advice and religious teachings was now leaving breadcrumbs of fear. But like many stories of domestic violence, the warning signs were easier to see in hindsight than in the moment. Even as she documented the escalating threats, she continued living her life openly, perhaps believing that her success, her new marriage, and her documented evidence would protect her. In the weeks before October 7th, the tension was building. Nitiffa kept up appearances, running her businesses, caring for her children, and maintaining her social presence. But she was also gathering evidence, recording conversations, and saving text messages. She was building a case, not knowing she was also documenting the prelude to her own murder. Those who knew both Nitiffa and Armand saw the collision course they were on. Here was a woman who had taken control of her destiny, who had turned a temporary arrangement into permanent prosperity. And here was a man who had lost everything, his properties, his future plans, his pride, watching the woman he blamed living the life he thought should have been his. Some in the community whispered warnings. They knew Armand's history, remembered the kidnapping case, and recognized the dangerous mix of wounded pride and lost fortune. But Nitiffa, whether through determination or necessity, kept moving forward. She had built too much, come too far, to let fear dictate her life. That's what makes the events of October 7th even more tragic. It wasn't a random act of violence. It wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It was the culmination of a story written in property deeds and prison sentences, in social media posts and recorded threats, in trust betrayed and revenge promised. The barbershop on Lehigh Avenue, a place of community, weekly rituals, of father-son bonding, would become the final chapter in this story. But before the shots were fired, before Nitiffa's life was taken in front of her son, there was one more cruel twist. Armand had been tracking her movements, waiting for the perfect moment. And what could be more perfect, more devastating, than striking when she was with their son? In those final moments, as Armand entered the barbershop, did Nitiffa know? Did she recognize that all her documentation, all her evidence, would now serve not to protect her, but to help tell her story? Did she understand that her success, built partially on his properties, would become part of her epitaph? The questions lingered in the air, along with the sound of gunshots that would echo through Philadelphia's streets, adding another chapter to the city's struggle with violence. But this wasn't just another statistic. This was a story about power, about control, about what happens when trust becomes a weapon. In the aftermath, as police launched their manhunt for Armand Hilton, as the community grappled with the loss of a beloved member, as her children faced a future without their mother, the deeper questions remained. How do we protect those who dare to rebuild their lives? How do we recognize the difference between threats and promises? And in a city known for brotherly love, how do we prevent love itself from becoming deadly? The investigation would yield its own revelations, but first, Philadelphia had to come to terms with what had happened on that ordinary Saturday afternoon, when a simple trip to the barbershop became the final chapter in a story of success, betrayal, and deadly revenge. The manhunt for Armand Hilton began immediately. Police plastered his face across Philadelphia, on street corners, social media, and news broadcasts. A $20,000 reward was offered for information leading to his arrest. The man who had once evaded capture in a kidnapping case was once again testing law enforcement's reach. But this time was different. This wasn't just another shooting in a city struggling with gun violence. This was a murder that had been documented, predicted, and almost scripted by the killer himself. The evidence Nitiffa had gathered, the recordings, the threats, the social media posts, now served as a tragic roadmap to her death. The community's response was immediate and powerful. Vigils were held, not just for Nitiffa, but for what she represented. A woman who dared to rebuild her life, who refused to be controlled, who documented her fears even as she continued to succeed. Her story resonated with many who recognized their own struggles in her journey. But perhaps the most haunting aspect of this case is its ripple effect. Nitiffa's children now face a future without their mother. Her son, who witnessed the shooting, carries not just the grief of loss but the trauma of that moment. Her businesses, built with such care and determination, stand as monuments to what she achieved and what was taken from her. And what about the properties? Those pieces of real estate that became the catalyst for tragedy. They stand as silent witnesses to a story about how quickly the line between business and personal can blur, how trust can become a weapon, and how success can sometimes carry its own deadly price tag. As this story comes to a close, we're left with questions that echo through Philadelphia's streets. How many other Nitiffas are out there, documenting threats, gathering evidence, and living in fear while trying to build their dreams? How many more lives will be lost before we learn to recognize the difference between empty threats and deadly promises? In the end, Nitiffa Wade's story is more than a cautionary tale. It's a wake-up call about the price of freedom, the cost of success, and the devastating consequences when love turns to possession, when trust becomes betrayal, and when promises become prophecies. If this story has moved you, if it's made you think about similar situations in your own life or community, don't let this moment pass. Subscribe to this channel, where we bring you the stories that need to be told, the voices that need to be heard, and the truths that need to be faced. Hit that notification bell to join our community of truth seekers and story sharers. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you witnessed warning signs in relationships around you? What would you have done in Nitiffa's situation? Your perspective might help someone else recognize their own red flags before it's too late. Remember, every like, every share, and every subscription helps us continue telling these important stories. Stories that might just save a life. This has been True Crime Stories 24/7. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in our next video.